Ladies and gentlemen, we are coming at you live from episode 114 of Life on the Rocks with your host, Connor Rocques. Today's featured guest in the hot seat is Dr. Ian Symington. Ian, how are you?
Very well, Connor, thank you. And thanks for getting the name right. People want to say Symington all the time. I don't know what it is. Sudbury thing, maybe? Canadian thing?
It could
Symington.
be. Maybe it's because you're from Coppercliff.
Maybe.
You never know.
Whenever I go visit family in Scotland, it's always Symington, so I know that it's the right way to say it.
Oh, that's even better. For everybody in the city of Greater Sudbury who wants to get to know Ian, this gentleman is a family doctor, but also, so this is the thing we want to talk about today, is that he is the official candidate for the Conservative Party of Canada in the Sudbury riding. So we're going to have a lot of discussion to talk about here. Ian, first and foremost, let's break it down a little bit. What got you started in your career?
My career. So originally I was a teacher, high school teacher, and I think that's a default career for a lot of people, right? A lot of people know the job, they've seen teachers in work, they've done their homework on the job, and they're exposed to a lot of great teachers and role models. So my original career was as a high school teacher, and I spent about 4 years doing that, and then I moved on to other things.
Talk about the transition a little bit. Like, what made you move on? Like, so you were a teacher, and then fast forward to now being a doctor. Like, how did that all happen? Break it down for us.
At the time, and it's probably still the same today, teaching's a great job. It's wonderful to be in the classroom, wonderful to be with the kids, wonderful profession to just have that career satisfaction. But at the time, teachers' jobs were short. My principal liked what I did in the classroom. He loved that I coach every sport we had. So he always made this weird and wacky job that no one else really wanted, so I got a job every year. But at the same time, I was reading about these doctor shortages. And there's a big movement going on with education and doctors' education in Sudbury. And I think I just sort of had this idea that it would be great to try to help solve this problem. Went back to medical school, and here I am today.
How difficult was that going back to school? In medical school, it takes a lot of time. Did it take a lot out of you? And then now, being a full-time doctor?
I think that the transition was not all that difficult. The big thing was the travel. I mean, essentially I had to leave my wife at the time to go down to Ottawa for as much as I had to study. We just worked it out. She came to visit me, I went to visit her. The academics I've never really struggled with. The medicine itself was just, it was a lot of joy, right? You get on these learning curves and it's something new, and I just took it on and really enjoyed it.
What's your favorite part about being a doctor? Tough question.
So many things, right? I mean, it's what I really like about it almost seems to be a dirty word these days, but I feel privileged to have people, they share their darkest, deepest secrets with me. Things they don't share with their family, things they don't even acknowledge themselves sometimes until we get it out. And I think that's, like I said, it's a privilege to be able to get into that personal level with people, make connections, and then the cliche is always, I want to make a difference. Of course, we all want to make a difference, but the journey to get there is quite satisfying.
I'd like you to talk something about being a doctor. Is you're helping people for a living, and it has to be one of the most rewarding features you could ever do in your life. It's like when you go save a life, you impact somebody, you're there for them, you're maybe to help them alleviate some of that stress they have. Can you walk us through the emotions you feel when you're able to watch somebody come into your office? They might be stressed, having a hard time, and then they leave, you help them. Can you talk about how that makes you feel?
Well, like I said, I mean, there's this idea of making a difference, which in medicine is true. I mean, you get that feedback, you get that satisfaction. I still have people come up to me and said, this guy saved my life. Sometimes it feels a little bit, overdone, but at the same time, this is how people feel about it. And I'm not working in the emerge anymore. I'm not working ICU. I'm not, bringing people back from the dead, as a lot of people think happens all the time. They watch Grey's Anatomy and think that's what a physician does. But just that whole sense of helping people figuring out what their problem is and getting to a solution. It's not always the case. You don't have 100% satisfaction or success rate in my job, and no one does. Not the best doctor in the world has 100% satisfaction. So you learn your humility and your humbleness when you're wrong, but when you're right, boy, it's very satisfying.
I think it's a really good perspective you have too, is that, that there is always times it could be subjective, certain things you're trying on people to make it work, you're just trying to find a solution. The interesting part I want to talk about, I think this is really good transition. So you go from being a teacher to a doctor, and then now you're going to be the candidate for the Conservative sub-riding. What got you started there? What sparked that feeling of wanting to help people in politics? Because it's, leaving a medical job to go and become a politician is definitely a difficult feat.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting, right? I think there's, I like to help people, and I think there's obviously a broader range of people and a bigger number to benefit in this new role I'm looking for. There's very much direct care and very much direct helping people as a physician. You impact maybe 1,500 to 2,000 people directly. But in the political world, you can impact tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands if you're doing the right things and making the right decisions. So I think that's probably where I've sort of gained my confidence and ideas to move this forward. And I think part of my reason for getting involved in the first place was that I just can't sit back and complain all the time, and if my motto is if you really don't like what's going on, then you try to change it and you try to make a difference.
I like that, and I think that's huge, and you bring an interesting perspective coming from the medical field too. So as a high level doctor, a lot of people are probably asking the question. They said, you got a nice job as a doctor. What was the breakthrough for you to say, that's it, I want to run, I want to have an impact? Do you have a specific moment you were sitting there that you said, this is what I want to do?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm a high-level doctor.
I give it to you. You're a good doctor.
Yeah, no, I think that, like I said, I've been just looking at things the last several years and not really liking where the country's going and where we as a society are moving. I think there's a lot of issues that just can't be fixed in your office alone, whether that's because you don't have the resources, you don't have the proper, people aren't coming in with perspectives that are going to work, and they're being fed perspectives from the top end. So I think, like I said, I want to make a difference. I've been following the political scene. I've been reading probably a Globe and Mail or a newspaper since I was 15 years old. I'm now 53, so you could do the maths on that. And right now, I'm not comfortable with where we are. I just want to make a difference.
And if you don't mind me asking as well, the other question the audience would ask too is why the Conservative Party?
I think my values have always been aligned there. I mean, it's interesting. I kind of looked this up as I was getting into it. So since 1984, we've had 17 and a half years of Conservative leadership and 17 and a half years of Liberal leadership. It's been split right down the middle. So it's interesting, right? We have this, the Conservative Party seems to be the one who cleans up fiscal issues and economical issues, and I think we're in need of that right now. I've always liked a party based on logic, based on what the country needs, trying to stay away from divisive issues, trying to stay away from choosing sides and propping up one group over the other. And I just think the Conservative Party is the one that does that.
That's a really good perspective too, and I think at the end of the day we're all people. The question that I have to ask you, it's hard. I mean, in politics it almost seems like a constant back and forth. Just like you said, people are constantly fighting over values, beliefs, what we should do with the country. How do you come together and find a middle ground working with other parties? So if you get into office and you want to impact and have that sustainable change, how do you work with these people? Like, what's kind of your approach on that to say, hey, we're all people at the end of the day. This is our solution. How do we meet in the middle, or how do we find ground to be able to grow as a nation?
Yeah, and I think that's key. First of all, I listen. All I do all day is listen. So my thing is that I listen, I think, and then I act. So I think if we're listening to people, and all people, whether that's your colleagues in Parliament, whether that's your municipal politicians, whether that's your provincial politicians, whether that's your constituents and the people of Sudbury, listening to all those people helps you gain a perspective. And I think once you gain perspective, you can just put those tools that you've been taught your whole life into action and make proper decisions that are going to help everyone. But as far as middle ground, it is a challenge, right? I think we've sort of, and I've alluded to it, we've been through this wave where you have sort of parties pushing agendas to the left, and you have parties pushing agendas to the right, and traditionally that's sort of offset each other. We have 5-6 years of rule of these guys, 5-6 years of rule of the other guys, and eventually we find middle ground that way. I think that's changing a little bit, and I do think the Conservatives are actually moving a little bit more towards the middle of right, and I think the Liberals are moving a lot more towards the left of center. So, there's a lot of ground to figure out here moving forward, for me and for the country.
No, 100%. And coming from your medical background, obviously COVID-19, the pandemic, has had a significant impact on everything. Doesn't matter what sector or industry you're in, whether it's politics, whether it's the medical field, whether it's just retail, it's even affecting shutting businesses down. How do you find your approach coming from the medical field is going to play into becoming a politician?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on the perspective, right? Perspective is key. Are we talking about from a healthcare perspective? If we're talking about from a healthcare perspective, then clearly I know the inner workings of the most basic levels of healthcare. The policies and the driving forces is something that I really want to learn about, and again apply my perspective to those decisions and thought-making processes. Economy, I think we have to be careful not to panic. I think we have panicked a little bit with economic situations and massive debt levels, and I think we've got to sort of look and see where we've been and what we've done with this, and then clean it up a little bit. And the Conservative Party has a pretty good platform. It's actually called Secure the Future.
Right.
So I think the Conservative Party is looking to sort of fix things moving forward, not just in relation to pandemic, although that's obviously a big factor right now. But those types of things are definitely on my radar.
Oh no, that's great. And how do you feel about the small businesses? So in a lot of sense, some people say we've been left behind in certain areas. It could be by the Liberal Party or even the Conservatives. Sometimes we struggle. Like, what are some of the things that, if you look at Sudbury as a small city, a lot of small businesses, what are some of the things that you want to focus on to help the small businesses?
Yeah, and I think, we're downtown, right? So we just have to walk down the street and we see a lot of empty shops. So there's no question that's a big issue. The small businesses, they've had support, but now they need they need to get that freedom to move forward again. And I think that's a big factor moving forward, is how much are we containing this virus? How much are we focused on the businesses? And I think our party is always focused on letting people succeed for themselves. Of course they need support at certain levels, but we also need to back off a little bit and let small business owners do what they do best, which is be entrepreneurial, use their sense of ingenuity, tap into what people need, and provide those services for them.
How do you feel about, so during the pandemic, in the midst of it, this is just a personal question, you look at, a lot of these businesses were shut down, and then you have places like Costco having a whole bunch of people in it, Walmart and the LCBO. I think even somebody went online and did a haircut in Costco because their business was closed down and they could have 500 people. How do you feel about that?
It's like anything else, and this is part of the reason why I want to get involved. Why are decisions made? We don't know. right? You and I, unless you're in some high-level talks with certain people, a lot of decisions are made without us knowing the details. So I don't want to speculate too much on why things were done. And I get it. There's a lot of inconsistencies. I'm not pointing at the federal government. I'm not pointing at the provincial government. I just think that we need to look back and see where we went and what worked and what didn't, and then really make sure that we get those things in place if this ever happens again for whatever reason.
Oh, that's great. Do you find politics gets too procedural, where we don't humanize it enough, where at the end of the day we're dealing with people and businesses? Do you feel like that a little bit?
I might need a clarification there. So when you say too
procedural, where so we'll go into the House of Commons and everybody's voting and having a hard time, and you see a lot of the time, if you're even watching some things in the House of Commons, it's one party's yelling at the other one's there, and in a lot of ways from the outside, somebody that's not involved, you think it seems like a back and forth.
And I think it is. I think that's part of the reason again why I want to get involved. Again, part of the Conservative platform is to restore accountability in Parliament and in Ottawa. And I think maybe to the point of your procedural, I think the issue is a lot of governments and leaders are not following procedures, and it's really frustrating. Paul Lefebvre from Sudbury, although he's in the ruling government, but he's representing Sudbury. He wants to get his points across. He wants procedural debate so that he can actually push the agenda of Sudburyans and move that forward to Ottawa. What's happening now, I think, is a lot of that debate is just being shut down. I'm like you get it fed through your Facebook or whatever feed you're watching. You see someone ask a question and the question is absolutely dismissed and not answered in any way, shape, or form, and you can see where it breaks down. Then all of a sudden the arguments start, the yes or no's, the 30 seconds. If the original question was honestly answered and earnestly answered, then I don't think we'd see the discourse that we see right now. But unfortunately, politicians are sticking to talking points instead of discussion, and I think that's got to change.
I agree with that 100%, and it is one of those things where people want to see the open dialogue and the back and forth and the thought process behind things. Breaking into that point, so this is important. So I've gotten to know Ian a little bit before this interview. We start talking, and you have a good energy and a vibe to you. So the thing I want to ask you is politics can be quite aggressive and negative in some lenses, right? There's a lot of stuff you see online that goes viral. They say, gossip spreads faster than praise. How do you feel about that, going into that light? You're doing a good job, and then going into the negative side of it, where you might have to fight back a little bit. Like how does that make you feel?
Well, from a personal standpoint, it's a challenge. I sit in my office all day, and some people criticize what I do, but very rarely. So I think you do have this almost false sense of security that everything you do all day long is the right thing. And this is going to open me up personally to criticism, and I think criticism is very important because it makes us make better decisions in the end. If we're listening to it as criticism, not personal attacks. I think I told you, I grew up in Coppercliff. I'm not worried about anyone saying anything that's going to hurt my feelings. I've been there before. I've fought the fight, and I just came out of a 12-year stint with the Girls Hockey League. There can be a lot of major emotions and anger directed towards people in that realm. So, and to be actually even more direct, I sit at the bedside and I hold people's hands when they're passing away, or I talk to family members who are experiencing this. I remember someone was complaining to me one time, and I kind of felt like saying, I'm just telling someone they have cancer. Can I call you back about this problem that you have right now? And that's not to minimize all people's problems, but I think when you've been given the weight of some of the problems in the world that are very, very real, it just gives you a little bit more perspective to keep the big picture in focus and not worry about all the noise.
If you don't mind me asking a personal question, how difficult is that to have to tell somebody that, hey, you're terminal, or to watch somebody go through that as a doctor? Like, are you able to desensitize yourself to that? Can you walk us through that a little bit?
I mean, I've been doing this for almost 20 years now. So you do get to know people very well. And unfortunately, some of those people who have been your favorite person to see, month after month or every 3 months for the last 10 years, they come up with these diagnoses, and then we are trained to be removed from it. We have to think objectively and independently, and we can't make these people part of our personal world, but it sure feels like that sometimes. But I always tell myself, if not me, who's going to be delivering this news? So I like to think that I can have that conversation with people because someone does, and I like to think that I might be the guy who can, get them through it again with a realistic perspective, and try to just make all the positives we can out of it, right?
That's big. That's actually a really great point. How do you feel about in today's age, if you're looking at politics? Another question I like to ask people, especially specific politicians, is I think something it's lacking is that emotional intelligence, being able to relate to people and really humbly deep down in your soul talk to them on that side of it. It seems to me, just talking to you in a lot of these instances, you got a high emotional intelligence where you're able to. Some doctors might just say, hey, this is how it is, but I can feel the vibe from you that you're able to kind of bring things in and try to shed a little bit of light. How do you feel about in today's age, if you become a politician, how EQ will play a role? Do you feel like that, like instead of just being black and white, straight to the point, do you feel like that plays a strong role, or do you want to pull that back a little bit?
Well, I think there's two aspects. On some issues, you do need to eliminate the emotions and have a proper dialogue based on facts and what's going to be the best solution for the situation. But at the same time, you really do have to read the room, and I think that that intelligence you're talking about is part and parcel to reading a room, seeing who's out there and what their feelings towards things are, and making sure that you present your points in a way that is being sensitive or at least not offensive to people around you, because as soon as you offend someone, then they're turned off. Your argument or your points that you're pressing are not reaching anyone at that point. So I think it is important from a political, or at least from a debating point of view, is to make sure that you see how people are going to see or perceive what you're saying.
I like that. That's a great point. The other thing, I want to switch gears a little bit. I figured this offers an interesting perspective. So talk about how your sports background, being a coach, along with playing hockey your whole life, has tied into your role as being a politician. Because if you look at sports, even team sports, you have to coach different people. You have people with different emotions. Maybe someone that's a hardhead, maybe somebody that's a little bit more emotional. Talk about how that's going to play into your role as a politician.
Yeah, so I think that does play a role, and I think it's exposure again. We have multiple personalities on a team in a setting that just teaches you how to deal with different people, from an athlete's perspective, which is a long time ago, to a coach's perspective. Team orientation and goals of the team are the most important things, so you learn how to tease out how to deal with people, but always in the vein of how do we move forward as a group. And like I said, I think that most of the studies show that societies move forward with team objectives better than individual objectives. So I think in politics, it just goes hand in hand. We need to approach things as a team basis, and that's going to move us forward.
Can you talk a little bit about your strategy on that, like your leadership style? Because you look at the old school mentality, it's like one way or the highway, and it seems to be in this generation, it doesn't work too well.
There's no question about it. I mean, people are just going to disengage, and we've set up this society where that's possible. Whereas before, if someone, wasn't towing the line, they would stick it out just because they had to, or they had no other place to go. In relation to coaching, or your previous question, I always said if people aren't coming to your practice, to our coaches, then that's on you. you have to make it the best game in town, right? You have to make it that they want to show up every Tuesday and Thursday and practice for you. So there is, yes, my way or the highway is sort of that old school, but you have to learn to deal with all the personalities in your group, and you have to make it interesting, and I think you have to do that by being genuine.
Definitely.
If you're trying to preach a message that you don't believe in, it's not going to work. You're going to fail.
It's probably the same when you went to university or school as well. I always found that when you had really good teachers, they draw you in, that you want to be there. It's almost like a, not just a lecture, but one of our teachers was so good. He was a lawyer, but it was almost like a comedy show at the same time. He'd be telling you, and then I find it's a better way to learn. Can you talk to us about the younger generation a little bit and how you're going to relate to that generation, being that you're a doctor, you come from different backgrounds?
Well, I think, one of the biggest things I have is I have 3 teenage daughters, so I've got exposure to that group right off the bat from a very personal level. I've dealt with young people all the way through with the sports aspect. Obviously, in my practice, I look after people from 1 day old till 101 year old. So I do have lots of experiences with young people in that regard as well. I think young people are no different than older adults or people my age. I mean, as long as you're engaged, you're listening, and you're not pandering, then I think they take you as being genuine, and you can reach some sort of common ground as to what's a good solution for any of their issues that they're facing.
Well, I think that's a great perspective too, and that is awesome. There's probably a lot of TikTok going on in your house. Hey, probably a lot of different TikTok videos. Did they ever get you doing any of the TikTok dances?
We stay away from TikTok for older people, and not because we don't want to. We just don't want to be made fun of. To be honest, that's a little tougher crowd than the Coppercliff ones.
Yeah.
No, I think that you got to be careful. Our kids were pretty much off of TikTok. I think we set an age limit for them. I forget what it was, probably 15 or 16. I think there's a little bit of a problem with people too young having phones and being exposed to these things on a regular basis. But TikTok, it is what it is, right? Let's put it this way. If you're on TikTok, you have to, and you should have to, be making it on your own. I know one of my daughters was not too happy when a politician went on TikTok and it was a paid advertisement, in her words. I don't think they like those things. If you put your own video out and all of a sudden you've made it big and you've got 2 million followers or whatever it is, well, then you've done it. But if you're just trying to sneak into platforms like this with paid advertisements and getting into the kids' heads, I don't think that works. Right.
No, it's good perspective too. And it's true, a lot of people nowadays just try to buy their way in, get in front of you and see what happens. So, but it's good because the younger generation there, they come from that perspective. It's good to see. A couple different things I want to ask you. I want to roll off a few different questions, and these are personal, but just about your life. Just for these, I call it a hot round of questions. So I want to ask you some more personal questions. I want to break it down a little bit. I call it hot rounds, where we start. I'm going to fire off a few different questions for people to get to know you. First things first. So being that you're a successful individual, do you have any rituals or priming rituals that you do every day to help start off your day?
I don't think any that would breed success. Success is obviously a broad definition, and I'm sure it's very hard to, what's the word I'm looking for, generalize that. Typically, I start my day with a cup of coffee and a newspaper, and probably 2 or 3 newspapers if I could on a weekend when I don't have to rush into work. But that's what I do. I keep up on the news. I tend to use mainstream media. And then that's how I start my day. It's great.
No, and what I meant too, and not success, you're a peak performer. Being a doctor, I mean, you're dealing with people's problems all day and trying to solve them. So that's what I meant. The other thing I want to ask you: how do you feel about people like Tony Robbins? So they practice neurolinguistic programming, things like that, but they have the rah, but there is some practicality there. How do you feel about that kind of approach?
I'm a little lost, so I should have prepped. Tony Robbins is a motivational guy.
Big motivational speaker. Yeah. Sorry about that for the audience out there. A lot of people know him, so he's got to be about seven foot tall. He's he's one of those guys that fills up an arena, and it's almost like a concert, but it's for it's motivational purposes.
Yeah, you know what? I think anyone who can tap into someone and get the best out of them is phenomenal. It's not an easy thing to do. You know, as parents, as physicians, as a teacher, as a coach, your whole goal is to reach into someone and get the best out of them. So if these motivational speakers have a way of doing it and pulling it out, excellent.
That's really good. I like that perspective. So another one too, the quote, leaders are readers. How often do you read? Like how often are you reading books, things like that? Do you focus on nonfiction, fiction, like anything as a preference?
I lots of different things between medical journals and medical information and continued learning. Fiction, lots of fluffy stuff. I won't get into to where we go with that, but Tad Williams and stuff like this, these fantasy things that just take me from as far away from here as possible in a book, and obviously the media and the news that we discussed earlier. So I would say, and magazines, I mean, lots and lots and lots of reading.
I think that's key. I think it's very important too. It's one of those things. It's like I like to say about reading. It's like going into the minds of people that could have passed away. So like Abraham Lincoln or any of these other people. It's you get to kind of see their perspective at that time. Another really important question. So this one I've been waiting on. It's an interesting one because you look at the current education system. So we're going a little bit more technical here. Take for example your daughters. For example, let's say they don't know what they want to do in their career. You jumped around a little bit too. You know, from a teacher to then becoming a doctor, now a politician. What would your advice be to that younger generation that's going to graduate high school, but they don't have a clear path? They don't know what to do. But then they might have a debt hanging over their head if they end up going into university to figure it out. What would your advice be to them?
I guess don't rush into anything and don't panic because you don't have a plan right away. I mean, plans come together sometimes with time, sometimes with more thought, sometimes with motivation or inspiration. So I think the days are gone where someone will get out of high school, go to post-secondary education, keep their career for 35 years, and then retire with a pension off into the sunset. People are changing careers. I think I read somewhere it's about 3 different careers in someone's life now. Schools are opening up to older students, mature students, whatever we're calling them these days. The idea of getting into school right away when you're 18 years old and you don't have a clue what you're doing, I don't know if that's the best solution, but certainly taking a year off and figuring out a plan and then going back to school, I think that's probably better. And the other thing I'd suggest is education is not a waste even if you don't go into your field. So case in point, when I interviewed at my University of Ottawa medical school interview, they kind of did a good cop, bad cop thing. They had the real nasty interviewer trying to provoke a response from you. And the question to me was, as a taxpayer, I've already paid for you to be a teacher. I've subsidized your education. Why on earth would I subsidize you again to become a doctor? And my answer was very simple. The education that I got as my physical education degree, my teacher's college, and all my minors that I got out of that education will only make me a better doctor. The second thing is, I played by all the rules. I'm not asking for any extra favors. I'm paying my tuition, I'm paying my debts, I'm paying my loans. And the third thing is, right now in my community, there's a lot of doctors needed. So I'm actually doing this to actually help out society rather than put extra burden on them. So the point is, education's never wasted. And in fact, I did a phys ed degree. Guess what? I got into sports medicine. I did a teaching degree. Guess what? I have done a lot of teaching of medical students and learners over the years. So all that stuff comes into play, whether you think it was a waste of time or not.
It's great. I like that perspective. That's an awesome way to see everything. Another question off of that, and this one's a good one. This is a thought-provoking one. So as we're going to continue on, this is an important one. If you could look back at your career, what would be one of the biggest pieces of advice you would give to your younger self?
I knew you'd stump me on something. What would I tell myself? I'm quite happy with the way things have turned out, to be quite frank. But I think probably just be a little bit more in the moment and a little bit less always looking ahead to the next thing. And I think at some point I figured out that never wish time away. Always spend your time in your day and enjoying your day, or struggling in your day, but don't sort of look ahead and wish something was over before you've seen it through. Does that make sense?
I like that. No, that is really good too. Another question, because you're a doctor, what would your advice be if you look at this generation, constantly on our phone, a lot of anxieties at an all-time high, depression's rising, mental health's been a struggle for people. How do you combat stress? Like, what are some things that you do in your life that can help people kind of alleviate that stress and not be so tense in a lot of ways?
Yeah, I think everyone has their own way of doing that. For some people, it's the time they spend in church. For some people, it's the time they spend exercising. For some people, it's producing or making production out of something, whether it's work or hobbies or pastimes. Personally, my stress levels I think I've just got to the point now where things are manageable for me, no matter, don't get me wrong, I'm sure you could throw something at me that'll freak me out a little bit. But personally, I think I've just seen lots over my years, and I'm at that stage where I'm quite comfortable with what comes at me and trying to deal with it on the level instead of making something that's not there.
That's great. And one of my last questions, this is a hard one, especially in this generation, with the cell phones, with the constant bombardment. How do you find balance in life?
I just think we're always on the go, and I guess that speaks to your point. So I don't know if there is balance. I don't think there's ever a moment where I'm not doing anything. Now, doing something can be enjoying music and listening to some music. I mean, you're still doing something, right? There's no downtime where you're absolutely just staring at a white wall and not doing anything. So the balance comes, I think, in just always being on and always, again, enjoying what you're doing, engaging in what you're doing. Sure, we multitask all the time, right? It's always amazing to me that I can deal with my accountant, deal with my patients, deal with my insurance and my buildings and my investments, all within the span of about 30 minutes. And you've covered so many different realms of your life in little short sequences. And I think it just comes from practice and being comfortable with what you're doing. The stress is there for a lot of people, but again, it gets back to this idea of be comfortable with what you're doing, be confident in what you're doing, and when stress comes, figure out what the best way to beat it is. And if you're multitasking and you're good at it, keep doing it. If you're not very good at multitasking, then drop a few and sort of define what you're doing for the time being.
Do you find in life a lot of the ways that you follow your passion? So a lot of people go into a job just to make money. Would you argue it's better to go out and follow that passion, follow that energy to be able to become successful or thrive?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you why. I'm exposed to all different walks of life in my practice. I see people at the lowest income level. I have people at the highest income level. I have people at the who don't work and can't work. I have people who do, run multi-million-dollar companies, and 10 of them or whatever the number is. So, it doesn't take a dollar value. It doesn't take a title. It doesn't take a job to make you successful or make you happy. It takes doing what you want. Well, one of my mentors, Dr. Paul Gibb, of all people, suggested to me, do what you want, do what you love, and the money follows. So don't do something just because the money's there. Do what you love, and somehow the money will follow you.
I really like that. And that's something, that philosophy I live by, is just chase the influence first. Chase it, the impact that you want to give, and see that vision and bring it to life. So I really like that. In our closing remarks, the one last thing I want to ask, because you wear so many hats, do you ever have any downtime, or how do you decompress? That's a lot you're taking in a day with different, could be illnesses or patients struggling or possibly a death you're going through, you're watching. How do you decompress?
Probably the same way most people do. I like spending time with my family. I like I said, I enjoy throwing on a record and listening to some music to slow me down. I got some headphones now, so I'm not disturbing my family at night when I'm listening. I go out and I do whatever physical stuff we do, whether it's for a good walk or a hike, playing hockey. All those things are decompressing for me.
That's great. In our closing remarks, Ian, do you have anything you'd like to tell to the audience out there, being that you're going to be running here for the Subway Conservative Party? Do you have anything out there you want to say?
Yeah, I think the big thing is, and it's not on point, it's more, I just hope people pay attention. You know, my biggest thing is I have all these issues that I take with the way our country's being run right now, or what's going on in politics, or the direction we're heading. And it bothers me a little bit because I don't mind if people are into it and disagree with me, but a lot of people just don't even pay attention. So all I can say is, I won't ask for a vote. All I'll ask for is pay attention, know the issues, and at least vote for somebody at some point.
That's a great perspective. Honestly, ladies and gentlemen, Ian, thank you so much for coming on the show this afternoon. It's been great to get to know you, and the riding is going to be starting up pretty soon, guys. So pay attention, get out and vote, listen to the perspective. Honestly, thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you.